So far, we've seen poles set by power equipment, such as a digger derrick, and manually by rigging from an existing pole. But sometimes a pole must be set in an area inaccessible to trucks, where there is no structure available to support rigging. When there is no way to rig the load of a pole, the pole will have to be physically lifted into position by the crewman. In this part of the program, we'll follow along as a crew uses pike poles to lift and set a wooden utility pole. Piking a pole requires a larger crew than other methods of pole setting because the weight of the pole must be lifted and controlled directly by the crewman. The size of the crew and the duties of each crew member may vary, depending on the size of the pole and specific company policies. However, the techniques and skills that this crew will use are typical. The crew has carried the tools and equipment that they will use from their parked trucks to the site where the pole will be set. Once at the job site, the crew holds their tailgate session to discuss exactly how the job will be done, any special safety considerations, and crew assignments. As the crew plans the job, let's look at a simplified illustration to see how they will raise the pole. After the hole is dug to the required depth, one side of the hole will be trenched out at an angle to accept the pole as it is lifted. The pole is moved into position with the butt at the hole. The top end of the pole is lifted off the ground by several crewmen. A brace, often called a pole jenny or dead man, is wedged between the pole and the ground to prevent the pole from falling between lifts as the men continue to move the pole upward. As the pole is raised, the butt begins to move into the hole. The edge of the hole also provides a pivot point, effectively shortening the length of pole that the crew must lift. The crew only has to lift the weight of the pole from the pivot point to the pole top, instead of the weight of the whole pole. As the pole is raised higher, it becomes more difficult for the crewmen to reach the pole by hand. They begin to use pike poles to continue to raise the pole. Let's look at an overhead view of the job to see how the pikers are arranged. All of the men keep out of the area immediately under the pole, just in case the pole should slip and fall. Most of the pikers are located in an area in line with the pole. These are the heavy pikers. They will provide most of the lift by raising the pole more directly. A guide piker is located to each side of the pole so that they can help control the pole as well as lift. In some cases, ropes, called straight lines, are used instead of pikes to control and guide the pole as it's being raised. Once the pole is in a vertical position, the pikes are used to plumb and secure the pole as the hole is backfilled. After the tailgate, the crew begins to dig the hole. As they dig the hole, one side is trenched out at an angle. A board called the kick plate or bump board is placed vertically in the hole on the side opposite the trench. The butt of the pole will ride down this board as the pole is raised. This prevents caving in the dirt as the butt of the pole scrapes against the side of the hole. The pole is moved into position so that it's over the trench, with the butt at the kick plate. When the crew is ready to set the pole, they'll begin by lifting the top of the pole by hand. When they've lifted the top end of the pole as far as they can, one crewman wedges a dead man between the pole and the ground. This dead man is constructed from a wooden beam with a toothed saddle on top to hold the pole. The dead man is used to support the pole while the crew members rest and shift their positions down the pole. In this manner, the crew members move along the pole, lifting, until the top end of the pole is high enough for the pikes to be positioned. Two crewmen stabilize the pole and the dead man while the rest of the crew prepares to lift the pole with pikes. With one crewman on each side of the dead man is prevented from moving from side to side and falling with the pole. The point of this pike is reversible and, for safety, is normally carried with its blunt end out. Just before use, the points are turned so that the sharp end is out. The first two pikers are guide pikers. They're positioned on each side of the pole so that they'll be able to stabilize the pole on the dead man. The points of their pikes are punched into the pole. Once the pikers have stabilized the pole, the other crewmen can leave the dead man to get their pikes. The other pikers set their pikes so that they're more in line with the pole. They are the heavy pikers, and they'll supply most of the lift as the pole is raised. The guide pikers will continue to stabilize the pole. A pike pole is normally held so that the end of the pole is in the palm of one hand with the other hand underneath. Both arms are extended downward and to one side. This is usually a comfortable position. This position also prevents the crewman from being in the direct line of the pike pole. If the pole should slip or have a sudden load shift, the crewman will be in the clear of the end of the pike. As the pole is raised, the dead man is repositioned to help support the pole. The men continue to raise the utility pole until it is too high for the lift to be continued from this position. The first crewman who can no longer lift the pole calls high pike. This is a signal to begin moving the pikes to a position lower on the pole. The man lowest on the pole moves his pike to the next position first. He's followed in order by the next highest man until all of the crewmen have moved to the new position. This way, each man has a clear path and doesn't have to lower his pike through the rest of the pikes. One crewman moves to the butt end of the pole. He uses hand signals to guide the pikers as they continue to raise the pole. As the pole moves to a fully vertical position, the pole settles into the hole. The pikes are repositioned around the pole so that they can be used to straighten the pole and stabilize it. The kick plate is removed so that it will not interfere with the plumbing of the pole. A cant hook is used to line the pole up with the other poles on the feeder. Care must be used when rotating the pole to prevent the points of the pikes from coming unseated. The pikes are used to plumb the pole. Once the pole is in position, it's secured by placing the butts of the pikes on the ground so that the pole cannot move. Once the pole is secure, the hole is backfilled. Well, we've just seen one way that a pole can be set when there's no structure to rig from and no access to the site for a derrick. In the next part of the program, we'll take a look at a method that can be used to replace a pole while setting the new pole in the same hole. In the meantime, be sure to read the material in your textbook on setting a pole by piking and answer the questions. Up to this point, we've seen several methods of digging a hole and setting a pole. However, some jobs will require the new pole to be set in the same hole as the pole it's replacing. In this part of the program, we'll watch a crew replace a pole using a method often called setting in place or cut and kick. Remember, the job that you'll see is just meant as an example. As in most pole setting jobs, the steps involved and the order in which they're done will vary according to the condition of the old pole, the job site, the equipment available, and company procedures. Be sure to check with your company to become familiar with the procedures that you will use. This is the pole that will be replaced. It has been decided that the new pole will have to be set in the same hole as the old pole. It has a cross arm supporting a three-phase feeder. The neutral is located on the pole below the cross arm. All lines must remain energized during the job. Because of the location of the pole, the crew cannot access the job site with trucks, so the job will have to be done manually. The crew holds their tailgate session to discuss how the job will be done and to make job assignments. They discuss the job of replacing the pole as a series of tasks. Let's look at a simplified illustration of the job site so that we can get an overview of these tasks. This is the pole that will be replaced. Since the old pole is still structurally sound above the ground, The first task will be to set up the rigging for the job. Before the new pole can be set, however, the old pole must be moved out of the way. Moving the old pole will be the next task. First, they will guy the bottom of the old pole in all 4 directions to keep it from moving unpredictably. Often, the top of the pole will also have to be guyed to stabilize it. In this case, because the spans are short and the poles on either side of the pole to be replaced are in good condition, the top of the pole will be held in place by the tied phases. Let's remove the 2 side guys so that we can see the other parts of the illustration more clearly. Once secured by the guys, the pole can be cut off just above the ground and the bottom of the pole moved to one side. The third task will be to remove the butt of the old pole. A pole jack will be used to pull the butt of the pole out of the ground. The hole must be enlarged so that it will be wide enough to accept the new pole and allow room to tamp and backfill. The next task will be to raise and set the new pole. Once the new pole is set and the lines transferred, the rigging can be moved to the new pole and used to lower the old pole to the ground. So the crew sees this job as 5 basic steps or tasks: rigging for the new pole, securing and cutting the old pole, removing the butt of the old pole, setting the new pole and transferring the lines, and finally, lowering the old pole to the ground. Let's go back to the field and see how the crew will accomplish each task. At the job site, the crew has already installed the cover gear on the phases and the neutral. The center phase has already been moved to the crossarm and tied into place to allow room to maneuver the new pole into place. The lineman begins to install the rigging that will be used. The rigging will be positioned first because the old pole is more stable before it is cut and moved. After installing a sling, the lineman rigs the fixed block of a block and tackle to the old pole. The movable block is lowered to the ground. The movable block and the fall line are secured so that they will be out of the way while the pole is moved. Steel pins are driven into the ground to provide secure positions to rig the guys that will be used to stabilize and move the bottom of the pole. Cribbing blocks are laid on the ground in the direction that the base of the pole will be moved, so that the weight of the pole will be spread over a wider area and the pole won't sink into the ground. A pole jack is rigged to the pole to prevent the pole's weight from binding the saw while the cut is made. The pole will have to be cut off just above the ground in order to move it out of the way. The crew will temporarily guide the bottom of the pole from all 4 directions. This assures them that they will always maintain control of the pole. A set of blocks is installed as the guide that runs in the direction in which the pole will be moved. The blocks will allow the pole to be moved easier and safer than by hand or gravity. The spans between this pole and the poles on either side are short, the phases are tight, and the other poles are in good condition. So the crew has determined that the top of the pole will be held in place by the tied phases after it is cut and won't have to be guyed. When the crew is certain that they will have full control of the pole can be cut. The cut is made just above the ground. This will prevent the pole from dropping significantly as it is moved onto the cribbing blocks. A strain is taken on the blocks to move the bottom of the pole far enough to clear the area around the butt. When the pole reaches its new position, all guys are secured and the pole is stable. Now the butt of the pole will have to be removed. The pole jack is chained to the butt of the pole and is used to pull the butt up out of the ground in stages. Once clear of the ground, the butt is unchained from the pole jack and moved out of the way. The hole will have to be enlarged to accommodate the butt of the new pole and the tamping tools. The butt of the new pole is measured to determine what the diameter of the hole will have to be. Then the sides of the hole are chipped away until the hole is the correct diameter. Now the crew can begin to set the new pole. First, the new pole is grounded to the system neutral with a mechanical jumper according to this company's procedure. Then the movable block of the block and tackle is rigged to the new pole with a sling just above the balance point. A portable capstan is rigged to the base of the old pole, and the fall line from the blocks is run to the drum of the capstan. The crew can now proceed to raise the new pole, plumb it, and backfill the hole. Once the new pole is set securely in place, the two poles are tied together. This maintains control of the top of the old pole so that the phases, which have been used to hold the top of the pole in place, can be transferred. The linemen then follow their company's guidelines to dress the new pole and transfer the lines from pole to pole. The last step is to remove the old pole. The crewmen have decided to drop the old pole in one piece. To do this, the block and tackle and the capstan used to set the new pole are transferred to the new pole. The movable block is rigged to a sling safely above the balance point of the old pole. A strain is taken on the blocks, and the old pole is untied from the new pole. Several crewmen on the ground control and maneuver the pole as it is lowered. Once on the ground, the pole is cut up into easy-to-move sections and carried away. Well, in this part of the program, we saw one way that a pole can be replaced with a new pole set in the same hole. Throughout this program, several methods of pole setting and replacement have been demonstrated. First, we watched as crewmen determined the size hole needed to set a pole and dug the holes with a digger derrick, with a portable power digger, and by hand. Poles were set with power equipment and manually with Pikes and a dead man, and by rigging from an existing pole. Then an old pole was removed by cutting it into sections and pulling the butt out of the ground with a pole jack. Pole setting and replacement jobs are common in distribution. With knowledge and experience, these jobs can be performed safely and efficiently.